In this world, whether we know it or not, we all serve many gods, ranging from things as simple as our phones and the news, to substances and video games, to gluttony, and all the way to religious beings like God or Muhammad or Buddha. But the question that looms above all of that is, who told us which god we should serve? What controls every single motivation and desire in this world? That question has haunted millions of people for thousands of years. And perhaps the horrific answer to that question lies in a book that was published in 2008. An answer so disturbing that few people dare think about it. An answer that might make you look at history through an entirely different lens. An answer that might open your eyes to the corruption and rot that hides beneath the floorboards. Oil is sentient, and humans serve its interests. In this video, I will dive deeply into the book known as Cyclonopedia, which proposes the theory that I just read to you. I will examine the psychological implications and the historical, societal, and political impacts that this theory could have on all of humanity, as I do believe this is one of, if not the darkest theories throughout human history. This video in theory relates closely to humanity's insatiable desire to grow and to expand through the Industrial Revolution and onward. And this theory really asks us to question what causes that insatiable desire to grow. If you enjoy these types of theories and deep dives and videos like this, stick around. This one will get crazy, so go ahead, grab a bucket of popcorn, open up your mind, grab your tinfoil hat, and let's get into the darkest theory in human history. The theory. In the simplest terms possible, the theory that this video is about states that the material that we know as oil or petroleum is actually sentient and it has agency, and underneath our noses it has been working to control the earth and humanity to serve its desires and best interests, and that it's been doing so since the dawn of time. That sounds insane, right? An inanimate goo controlling all of our desires, all of our achievements, all of our want to go forward. Crazy, right? Right? Let me point you directly to the book that proposes this theory and describe it so it might make a little bit more sense to you. Cyclonopedia. Cyclonopedia is a speculative book that was written by Reza Negarestani. Now, Negarestani himself is an Iranian philosopher who is best known for this book, but he spent his entire life philosophizing and theorizing humanity and all the concepts that lie within. For a while, he bounced around between different philosophical phases, beginning with beliefs in speculative realism, and eventually finding his standing in the rationalist and humanism camp. Now, I'm not going to pretend like I know what any of that means or the differences between those beliefs, so I'm going to link videos and articles below if you really want to dive deeper into them. But as far as this video is concerned, Cyclonopedia is the most impactful work of Negarestani's career and possibly the entire genre, because essentially it pioneered this new genre when it was released back in 2008. The genre in question is now known as theory fiction, and it's underneath that name where we get the theory that today's video is about. In order for you to understand the theory and understand the evidence and everything that's behind it, I will have to give a summary of the book Cyclonopedia, so that's what this next part's going to be. I completely and utterly suggest reading the entire book yourself if you want to get all the details from the first-hand account. This is a summary. It does not replace the book. Please read the book if you want to, but if you just want to turn this on in the background, or if you're just a casual listener and you want to hear about weird oil controlling all humanity, this is the video for you. Cyclonopedia states that, quote, "The Middle East is a sentient entity. It's alive." And the book essentially dives deep into that idea. It funnels those thoughts into talking about the wars that are in the Middle East, humanity's achievements, and all of humanity's ideas, advancements, politics, socioeconomic factors, all of that coming and trickling back down to one single thing: oil. In order to get the most accurate summary before I give my perspective on it, I will read the short book summary that is given, and from this, you'll be able to see what it's all about. At once a horror fiction, a work of speculative theology, an atlas of demonology, a political sasmodat, and philosophic grimoire, Cyclonopedia is a work of theory fiction on the Middle East, where horror is restlessly heaped upon horror. Reza Negarestani bridges the appalling vistas of contemporary world politics and the war with the archaeologies of the Middle East and the natural history of the Earth itself. Cyclonopedia is a Middle Eastern odyssey populated by archaeologists, heresiarchs, corpses of ancient gods, and other puppets. The journey to the underworld begins with petroleum basins and the rotting sun, continuing along the tentacled pipelines of oil, and at last unfolding in the desert, where monotheism meets the Earth's tarry dreams of insurrection against the sun. The Middle East is a sentient entity. It is alive, concludes the renegade Iranian archaeologist Dr. Hamid Persani, before disappearing under mysterious circumstances. The disordered notes he leaves behind testify to an increasingly deranged preoccupation with oil as the, quote, lubricant of historical and political narratives. A young American woman arrives in Istanbul to meet a pseudonymed online acquaintance who never arrives. Discovering a strange manuscript in her hotel room, she follows up with its cryptic clues, only to discover more plot holes. And she begins to wonder whether her friend was a fictional quantity all along. Meanwhile, as the war on terror escalates, the US is dragged into an asymmetrical engagement with occulters whose principles are ancient and obscure and saturated in oil. It is as if war itself is feeding upon the war machines, seducing the aggressors into the dark heart of oil. So as cool and awesome as that sounds, in layman's terms, it's kinda similar to the Dune series, except instead of spice and Arrakis and the Fremen and the Harkonnen, this book is about oil, the Middle East, the jihadis, the oil families, archaeologists, big oil, and the socioeconomic and political happenings that are within all of that. The book itself is extremely expansive, and it really is just way too long to summarize on YouTube, so I won't be going over each individual section. I will instead focus on the part of the book that goes with the theory that this video is about. I want you to continue watching the rest of this video with an open mind. While this work is completely fiction and theory fiction, asking these questions that the book proposes is very important as a basic human to understand why we do the things that we do, and why society is shaped the exact way it is. Take an introspective look in your own life and see just how much of it is controlled by oil, even down to the most minute parts of it. With all that out of the way, let's now dive into the specific parts of the book that go over this theory. I will be reading the excerpts directly from the text to you, giving my own insights and my own interpretations of this text, and connecting it with everything that we know in life. Strap that tinfoil hat on, you're gonna need it, and let's get into it. Negarestani in Cyclonopedia asks the question, why so many wars have been fought inside and around the Middle East since the days of old, the Bible times, the beginning. What is the root cause, and why is it so ingrained in every aspect of many people's lives? He encourages you to rip back the surface level understanding of these wars and dig down to the root cause of most of it. And again, he claims that the root cause is petroleum, oil, Tellurian lube. Essentially, Cyclonopedia is saying that oil has a life and an intelligence in its own right, and it really desires and wants to be used by humans in order to create and produce energy and heat, and by proxy, that means warfare and geopolitical turmoil. In a way, oil and earth are both alive. They're both entities in their own right, and they're sentient. And along that line of thinking, earth and oil want to begin this interdimensional apocalyptic death. You know, the Gog and the Magog that I've discussed in this video, the ending of everything. Because the earth kind of sees the sun shining on it, and it almost has an opposition, a little sibling syndrome, if you will, to the sun's light. The earth desires to be more, so this oil is produced and extracted to produce more and more heat and more growth, and by result, more and more death. Humanity is warmongering. We are starving and desiring progress and mining and harvesting of these fossil fuels and this oil. And we will continue to do so at growing rates until we meet our own demise at our own hands. This book, Cyclonopedia, really shows the world as this giant chess match, except every piece involves a different geopolitical party, a different race, a different ethnicity, all vying for the same substance, the same ends. That would be to mine and harvest this oil. Except it's because the earth wants its oil to be mined. That way we produce more and grow more and become this one giant war machine. The narcissism, the depravity, the avarice of mankind to mine the oil to harvest it will eventually cause a self-destructive collapse, all because oil and the earth wants to outshine the sun. I think. This book is very complicated. Quote, "The answer is oil. The war on terror cannot be radically and technically grasped as a machine without consideration of the oil that greases its parts and recomposes its flows." He then goes on to describe oil as a Tellurian lube, or in simple terms, the liquid that Earth, Terra, runs off of, the blood that flows through its proverbial veins. The following excerpt from the book explains that in more detail. The discussion at Hyperstation ultimately developed into what would later be defined as blobjectivity, or the logics of the petropolitical undercurrents. According to a blobjective point of view, petropolitical undercurrents function as narrative loops. They interconnect inconsistencies, anomalies, or what we might simply call the plot holes in narratives of planetary formations and activities. To this extent, petropolitical undercurrents run through terrestrial decoding machines, conspiracies, politics, and Tellurian dynamics. A blobjective view necessarily diverges from the Earth as a whole towards an entirely different entity, an Earth under the process of Earthication. Earthication is a process spread out in at least three directions. One is the leveling of all planetary erections, or idols, or the attainment of a burning immanence with the sun, and the burning core of the Earth. Number two, the immersion of the planetary body in flows and undercurrents, pushing the Earth towards full-fledged sogginess. And number three, a participation with the Earth as a manifest degenerate entity for which wholeness is but a superficial distraction. War on terror cannot be radically and technically grasped as a machine without consideration of the oil that greases its parts and recomposes its flows. Such consideration must begin with the twilight of hydrocarbon and the very dawn of Earth. Obviously, I know that was a lot to read, a lot to take in, and a lot of fancy words being thrown at you, but essentially, Nagarastani is pointing to the fact that the war machine, the idea of war and fighting over these religious institutions and fighting over all these things, as it relates to the Middle East, goes deeper than just petty boundary battles. He even brings into the fact that somehow the sun and the core of the earth are connected, because oil comes from very deep in the ground near the core of the earth. He introduces this concept of a blobjective viewpoint, which, as he said, blobjectivity is just the logistics of the petropolitical state of the world, meaning how oil flows through society and the economy. He promotes these ideas of oil being the lubricant that fuels the war machine of the earth. And there at the very end of that page, he begins to discuss the Gog-Magog axis, and we'll touch more on that later, but essentially this ties the theory into Abrahamic religions. I love that quote where he says, "The answer is oil." Nagarastani essentially calls the oil system, the pipelines, the export and the import of it, that interconnect the inconsistencies and anomalies of the entire Earth. Think of pipelines and oil rigs as the veins and capillaries that drive this so-called heart or core of oil of the Earth. Again, I know this sounds kind of outlandish, kind of weird, but stick with me while I read this next page. Nagarastani then goes on to recount Dean Koontz's novel called Phantoms, in which Timothy Flight, a renegade paleontologist, describes in jest the monster or the entity of oil that Nagarastani also thinks about. Quote, In Dean Koontz' novel Phantoms, Timothy Flight, a renegade paleontologist who considers himself a professor of ancient epidemics, is a tabloid writer researching an unmanageable Tellurian sentient being, which he calls the Ancient Enemy, responsible for devouring countless civilizations. The Aztecs and the lost colony of Roanoke, for example. Timothy Flight finds many parallel traits between the Ancient Enemy and the Antichrist. Examining the corpses of the victims, he detects trace amounts of porphyrin, a chemical substance common to blood, plants, and petroleum. The Ancient Enemy, or the Tellurian Antichrist, which persistently looms in the Mesopotamian Dead Seas, or near the oceans, is indeed petroleum, or naft, the Arabic and Farsi word for oil. According to the classic theory of fossil fuels, petroleum was formed as a Tellurian entity under unimaginable pressure and heat in the absence of oxygen and between the strata, in absolute isolation. Petroleum's Hadean formation developed a satanic sentience through the politics of in-between, which inevitably wells up through the god complex deposited in the strata. Petroleum's autonomous line of emergence is twisted beyond recognition. Emerged under such conditions, petroleum possesses tendencies for mass intoxication on pandemic scales. So in that page, Nagarastani calls back to a book that was written in which he believed the biohazardous predator called the Ancient Enemy is very similar to the Antichrist in the way it's described, where it comes from, and its characteristics. Nagarastani believes this Ancient Enemy, or the Tellurian Antichrist, to be petroleum, or naft, the Arabic and Farsi words for oil. He calls into question the common belief that oil is created in absolute isolation between unimaginable pressure and heat and the absence of oxygen underneath all the earth. He posits that because of its creation in the core of the earth in this sun-like place, that the oil could develop a god complex as it's deposited into the strata. Just as many monotheistic beliefs in Abrahamic religions liken the god or gods to the sun, the oil could do the same. And since it was created in a place of unimaginable heat and pressure, like the sun, it itself might be so emboldened to call itself God. Emerged under such conditions, petroleum possesses tendencies for mass intoxication on pandemic scales. Throughout this entire work, Nagarastani likens oil, or the Ancient One, almost as some sort of Lovecraftian entity, this being that is self-aware and that knows how to fulfill its own prophecy of destruction and control. A creature that knows how to make itself useful and prop itself up on a pedestal. Really a horrifying thought to even ponder. It's in our cars, it's in our engines, it's in our planes, it's in our technology, it's in our ground. It's at the center of every geopolitical war. It backs our currencies. It is everywhere. It is both the cause of and solution to life and death in many scenarios. Oil has society wrapped around its finger. Down further in Cyclonopedia, Nagarastani takes it a step further, if that's even possible, drawing the mathematical equations and axes between Gog and Magog as they're mentioned in the biblical book of Revelations, and showing how the undercurrent of the petropolitical state and the flow of oil could eventually propel forward this biblical apocalypse. Now, Gog and Magog are mentioned in the biblical book of Revelations, and they're supposed to be this idea of nations fighting this end-time apocalyptic war. And Nagarastani creates these graphs to show X and Y, Gog and Magog, moving towards each other because of the flow of oil. Could humanity, using the petropolitical state of oil, end up causing this Gog and Magog spiritual apocalypse? And if so, will humanity continue to base its evolution into more technology and warfare around the concept of oil? Bloody wars have been fought in the past over this oil, wars in the present as well. Who's to say that it won't be our own undoing in the end? It seems, therefore, that both the techno-capitalist process of desertification of the War on Terror and the radical monotheistic ethos for the desert converge upon oil as an object of production, a pivot of terror, a fuel, a politico-economic lubricant, and an entity whose life is directly connected to the earth. While for Western techno-capitalism, the desert gives rise to the oilness of war machines and the hyperconsumption of capitalism en route to singularity, for jihad, oil is a catalyst to speed the rise of the kingdom, the desert. Thus, for jihad, the desert lies at the end of an oil pipeline. Or, once again, take oil as a lubricant, something that eases narration and the whole dynamism towards the desert. The cartography of oil, as an omnipresent entity, narrates the dynamics of planetary events. Oil is the undercurrent of all the narrations, not only the political, but also the ethics of life on Earth. Oil lubes the whole desert expedition towards the Tellurian Omega, either as the desert god or the host of the singularity of New Earth. As a Tellurian lube, oil simply makes things move forward. Kuntz's Phantoms is key for this movement towards the Tellurian Omega through the superficial gas pipeline, the subterranean oil reserves, and the deeply chthonic thingness of petroleum, the blob. To grasp oil as a lube is to grasp Earth as a body of different narrations being moved forward by oil. In a nutshell, oil is a lube for the divergent lines of terrestrial narration. Again, this next page, Nagarastani is nailing home the fact that every single action taken on a planetary scale is lubricated and propelled forward by oil. The last paragraph on this page is also extremely interesting to me. It reads as follows. Kuntz's imagery is really helpful for grasping the thingness of oil, its subterranean cohesion as a singular, anorganic body with its own agendas. And here we finally get Nagarastani talking about the sentience of oil. Quote, assuming here that the blob takes on an increasing function on the journey upriver from gas station to Chthonic reservoir, Bush and bin Laden are obviously petropolitical puppets convulsing along the chthonic stirrings of the blob. Collapse all manifest policies and ideologies onto the Tellurian narratives of oil seepage, the concrete war machines chopping up contemporaneity are indubitably very oily. The oil industry is utterly ruinous for independent and non-collective oil producers. But when it comes to oil, they are distanced from each other by different petroleum extraction processes and political agendas. In terms of oil, all they share is poverty and ruination. However, in the case of the Islamic Front, oil has been mutated into a kind of constructive parasite through which economical, military, and political brotherhood emerges. For the Middle Eastern countries, there is a strategic symbiosis between oil as a parasite and monotheism's burning core. Because oil wells up on a, quote, Islamic continent, not a mere geopolitical boundary. Islam has perceived oil as an ultimate Tellurian lubricant, or as a lube of all the narrations on Earth. Once again, these paragraphs are where Nagarastani props up and promotes the ideas that the socio-political systems, specifically in the Middle East, but also worldwide, are controlled and propped up by this oil entity, this blob, this ancient being, this creature formed under fire and smoke, and the pressure of being miles and miles underneath the surface. Does it think it's a god, and are we its servants? There is one last paragraph I would like to read to you before I go to the conclusion of this video. It reads as follows. Quote, an autonomous chemical weapon belonging to Earth as both a sentient entity and event, petroleum poisons capital with absolute madness. A planetary plague bleeding into economies mobilized by the technological singularities of advanced civilizations. In the wake of oil, as an autonomous terrestrial conspirator, capitalism is not a human symptom, but rather a planetary inevitability. Or in other words, capitalism was here even before human existence, waiting for a host. I think that paragraph sums up the entire book of the Cyclonopedia and Nagarastani's beliefs in this book about oil. Petroleum poisons the capital, which symbolizes the world, into absolute madness. It is a plague that seeps from the dark, grotesque blob heart of the earth, and it bleeds out and seeps into the economies, mobilizing war efforts, causing friction and fractures between civilizations. He calls oil an autonomous terrestrial conspirator that not only promotes capitalism, but created it. Because, in other words, capitalism was here even before human existence, waiting for a host. There is so much more to the Cyclonopedia that I could not possibly fit into a YouTube video, and especially with my just general lack of understanding of a lot of the topics, I wanted to touch just on the theory this video is about. Oil being sentient and humanity serving its interests, and I hope and I think that I got that point across without rambling too much. I will link the book below if you want to purchase it. I 100% recommend reading it. I might do a follow-up video to this if you want to see more geopolitical and oil-related things like this, but I think I've been able to get across what Nagarastani wanted to promote up in the simplest way possible. His work, although theoretical fiction, it really should make you think. Is oil this Lovecraftian being that literally just rules over humanity from the depths of the earth? Is almost every single thing that every single country does related to the production and housing of oil? Quote, as soon as it ignites, it sticks to objects, blurring them, pervading them, but never allowing them to evaporate or reduce to ashes. It keeps them in another form to burn. It is the only incendiary substance that thickens as it flows. Love is incomplete burning. In my scarred, fevered skin, you see a person who belongs to sickness. In your healthy flesh, I see the same. Oil was discovered in Iran, or Persia at the time, back in 1901. And in that last 123 years, think about how much we as a society, we as the earth, has changed and morphed. Human history dates back thousands of years before 1901. However, the advancements that have been made in these last 100 years are so much further beyond the advancements made in the thousands of years before we found oil. Transportation, infrastructure, ideation, society, food, warfare, it is all built on the finding of oil. Crude oil goes into our machines, our computers, our cars, our earth-moving equipment, our planes. Oil is at the root of everything, and Nagarastani explains that in his works, maybe a little too thoroughly. But if oil is this entity, this being that seeks to control, where does it come from? Who put it here, and why does it have this draw to do so? Is it like Nagarastani says, and because of its creation deep in the bowels of the earth, in the hot, sun-like environment, it believes itself to be a god? Or is it because thousands of years ago, aliens crashed here and had oil with them and it seeped into the ground and grew? Or is it more of like an all tomorrows approach, that millennia ago, humanity devolved into this anthropomorphic goo, whether through a punishment or their own hubris, and that oil is now the melted remains of that lost generation? Yes, all of the theories I have discussed are extremely far-fetched, as most of you know, but at the end of the day, we still have to wonder why petroleum, this Tellurian lube, this black gold, this Texas tea, this manna from heaven, is so important. We survived thousands of years before we found it and utilized it. Why is it now the only thing able to bring us into the modern age? Well, not the only thing, but one of the main things. And because of that, and a byproduct of that, will it simultaneously be the downfall of humanity? Will it bring about Gog and Magog? Will we all sink and drown in the Tellurian lube of the world? Oil begets advancement, begets war, begets death. And sin begets sin, begets sin, begets sin. Thank you all for watching until the end of the video. I hope this was cohesive enough to make any sense at all. I really love making videos like this, but it's kind of hard to put these kind of books and theories into an understandable way for a short YouTube video. So I tried my best. If it didn't make any sense, sorry. There is so much more to Cyclonopedia. I 1,000,000,000% recommend you to read the book. It is literally eye-opening and incredible. I just wanted to get across the point that Nagarastani touches on, how oil is indeed a sentient entity in a way, and humanity might serve its desires by using it. So again, I hope I made it make sense. If you did enjoy it, please leave a like. I really love making these kind of videos and I want to make more. And comment your opinions on the theory. I want to see what y'all have to say. I want to see the theories and everything y'all come up with. Can't wait to see that. Love and appreciate each and every one of you. Make sure you tell somebody you love them as well. And with all that said, I will see you in the next video. Thank you for your support and have a great day.